Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And for anybody that's watching, we're delayed for a moment as we wait for our colleague, Mrs. Applegore, to join us. She's had some technical difficulty. Live again.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, thank you. We're starting a couple of minutes late this evening. For those that have been watching, we're waiting for Mrs. Applegore to join us. She's having some technical difficulties, so we're going to open the meeting and she'll join us as soon as she can possibly get in. Would someone move item 1.01, please? Or no, excuse me, I'm calling the meeting to order. Item 1.02.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? And Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
And to those of you watching, if you wish to make a comment or you have a question, you may do so through our online, through our board email. It is to clerk@fulton.cnyric.org. You may find that on our website if you didn't get that down. With that, now takes us to item 1.04, please.
Move it.
Second?
A discussion? All those in favor, Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Item 1.05.
Move it.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Applegore? Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
So under President's report, I want to add that I have an added item, the legislative forum. You should have received information about it. It's through Central New York School Boards Association. In your email, it's scheduled at this time for February 6th from 9 to 10:30 in the morning. It is a virtual forum. You need to respond individually through that email. There is a place to click if you're going to attend. So I just want to remind you, please look for that in your email and let them know whether you're attending or not. There may be, I don't know if there will be an Oswego County separate forum. I know it's being worked on at this time. So I'll let you know if that comes to fruition. Are there any questions regarding the upcoming meetings, Health, Safety, and Policy Committee? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Polvino.
All right, good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. It's our first meeting in 2021, and hopefully it's going to be a great school year, the rest of 2021 and going into 21-22. A couple things before I turn it over to my team this evening. A couple things I want to just say. Thank you to our staff and our students and our community members. Moving to remote learning has been a challenge, I know, for everyone. Obviously, we have our eyes on next week and January 19th, next Tuesday. And hopefully the data will allow us to be able to do that because our kids and our students and our staff need to be together. You'll hear more about that later this evening. I think you'll see that the best place for our kids is right in our schools. And I wish I could change time and fast forward and get all 3,200 here with all of our staff each and every day. And we miss them, and we really need to get them back here. So hopefully on January 19th, we'll have green lights and the data and COVID and everything works well. Also, I wanted to just provide a very brief update on our testing. We have applied for our limited serviceable laboratory, our LSL, a fancy term that allows us to work with under Dr. Morgan's licensure. That would allow us, in the event that we had to test our students being in a yellow or an orange zone type of thing, we would be able to do so. We've been working closely with the Department of Health as well. Very different than some other counties around us. There's less services and supports that they can provide us. They're just so extended with their resources. They're wonderful, but we do have that set up. So that'll be in place in the event of, and that's for the BIMAX testing if we needed to do that. That's the one of the tests that's the major one coming out of New York State, and the one that's been used in majority of schools in our region and across the state. We've also, in tandem, because I never believe in looking at just one way to do something, also looking at saliva testing through University Hospital, but there'd be a cost associated with that. And we've been teaming up with a couple of the districts near us and with Dr. Morgan's office, just making sure we have another iron in the fire as well. You always want to be looking at some different types of things. So obviously we're working on that. We want to make sure we're prepared, but I hadn't really provided an update to the board with respect to that. So our LSL is in process and obviously preparing in the event that we needed to go down that road. The other piece, and I'd asked Mr. Els to join in with me a little bit. Vaccination started this week, and that was great news. And to see that educators were in 1B and all of the staff that are associated with our schools. So, all of our bus drivers and so on and so forth, all aspects of are all eligible. We got that out first thing Monday morning. I think as we were driving in, we were communicating with each other. And early in the morning, we had gotten information out, and it was confirmed we did it the right way and got it out the way we did it. The health departments were getting the information at the same time that we were. So once again, it allowed us to get out in front of it a little bit. And so we've heard that a lot of our teachers, our staff members are signed up to get vaccinations. Now we'll see if that happens. I saw, I think it was in a community to our east, a couple counties over, they had a vaccination clinic scheduled and it got canceled for tomorrow because there's a lack of vaccinations. So having the appointments is great to get those and up and rolling. And then the second piece that goes along with that is the vaccinations. So Chris, you want to talk a little bit about the opportunities that look like they may be evolving here in our community?
So thank you for inviting me tonight. I do have a quick update as far as the vaccinations go. So I've been working with the county health department, and they came to GRB yesterday, and they looked over our site at GRB, and they're going to be using GRB as our as a test or as a vaccination site. And that it is a county-wide site. It's not a Fulton site. It's not just for teachers in Fulton, but it is in Fulton. Which is very convenient for our staff and community. They would have to be either 1B or 1A vaccination person in order to be eligible. There will be a link going out here shortly once everything is finalized. But as Mr. Polvino said, they got to make sure that they have enough doses in order to open up a full day clinic. They are looking at a Saturday, possibly this Saturday. The times are not definite yet. Again, we're waiting on to see the final numbers of the vaccination. In addition to that, I received a phone call from one of our local pharmacies. He is also willing to help us with vaccinating our staff and being able to get vaccinations done right here at one of our schools. Again, it would be an after hour or even on a weekend. So we're not impacting school hours or teaching hours during that time. We still are waiting for the amount of vaccinations that come in. Very frustrating for the health department, as they are not getting the numbers that they really need in order to vaccinate our community. And some of those vaccinations are going to bigger counties around the state. And, just south of us is getting a substantial amount more vaccinations than we are here in our county. So they're very frustrated with that, but there's not much they can do about it either. So at this time, our Oswego County Health Department is opening up clinics on Wednesdays at their department, and then on Saturdays they're looking at, like I said, different sites, and this Saturday looks to be like it'll be at GRB.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Good news for us, good news for our community, good news for all school districts that this opportunity is happening.
One question I had, Brian, is will we be able to at least have a number of how many staff are vaccinated as a result of the effort, just so we have a sense for decision-making purposes?
Yes.
Moving forward.
Yeah, that's how you read my mind. We actually, I had that conversation with actually Mr. Lisi this morning, and I were talking about that. We're going to meet with Ms. Geithner and Mr. Carroll and Mr. Ells, because I said, it's great that we're getting all this opportunity, but I want to have a repository to determine who's been vaccinated. How would we go about making sure we know who's out there? That includes, we've also been working with Golden Sun as well. So they're an extension of us, but an important piece. So we're going to be looking at how we can collect that information while following all of the laws that are associated with HIPAA and all that.
But the health department doesn't provide that number?
They may. I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, you and I discussed when we were talking about GRB this morning, we're actually going to have a tech person there because I believe everything gets recorded right into the system, and they may be able to help us with that as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. That they will be entering all of the data in. As far as the numbers or names that come back out, I'm not sure on how the HIPAA laws would work on that.
Yeah.
So
I'm not wondering about names. I was just wondering number.
Oh,
number wise. Okay. I can definitely ask them that.
Chris, when you're speaking to them, you may want to ask them maybe if they put an employer field in there. That might be helpful, because then they could sort it by employer. That may be very helpful, because that'd be very helpful for local businesses as well. Beyond, as they get the opportunity to have the vaccinations as well. It may be a great tool as well. So it may be something, a suggestion we could make.
Absolutely. I can definitely reach out to them.
Okay.
And Chris, for the county vaccination, do people still go to the state and sign up, or do they go to their county site and sign up?
So right now, they would go to the state. It's not up and live yet because they don't have it confirmed as a testing site.
Okay.
But as soon as it does, it goes into the state site that they're able to register on.
Okay. All right. Someone should ask. I wanted to know.
So
Absolutely.
a question also, when you go on that site, it's can be very confusing. So would they have the name of our site on there like they have right now, like Kinney's and all the addresses they would have the name of our site?
That is correct. So when you go in there and register, you can pick a site within 100 miles or even within 30 miles of your location, and it would give all those locations. You can pick the site that you want to go to.
Okay.
So as soon as ours gets approved, then GRB would be listed as a option for them.
Now, would we be doing our own personnel first? I mean, how does that work, or can anybody go on there?
Yep, it's anybody who registers on there.
Okay.
If you have your staff that is maybe getting their vaccinations in another county, will that go into your count that you're talking about possibly having set up at GRB?
I
how
believe
would you
so.
know per se if they're in another county getting their vaccine?
That's what I'm concerned about, Brenda. Like, for example, I'm slated in Onondaga County later this week. I was able to get one, for example, at the state fairgrounds. And so my question, and maybe I'll ask when I go there and get them, I'll ask when they're logging me in or whatever, how does that data get back to, is there ways that we'll be able to find that out? Or will they give us a card? We're going to have to work our way through this process a bit. But I really want to be able to know and be able to verify, who in our system is here and who's been vaccinated and who do we have to continue. I want to make sure that every person has the opportunity as quickly as possible to get the vaccination. And so we will share information as quickly as possible as we go along, work closely with the DOH to see how we can get that info.
They
Brian,
do have it when you
I am-
register, having registered for an appointment already, and mine is later this week as well. They do ask the name of your employer, in this case, the school district.
But they
I
don't,
did mine on Monday.
for other people. Not
Yeah.
everybody gets asked that question.
Right.
Well,
I
no,
did
that's
on
off
Monday.
that's off the registration form that everybody has to fill out.
It's not on the one I filled out today.
Did
Yeah.
you register as a school employee?
I did not, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It
that-
doesn't necessarily
I
have where
think
you work.
I think it depends on the drop downs that you pick.
Yeah, I didn't get asked for what school district I was part of.
We did.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, again, I think, as I said, I think what we're going to do is we're going to find out. I know, for example, I had to enter Fulton City for me. What I would want to know, and we can get this through the DOH and try to understand the system more, but will they be able to download that from the database? Will that be a possibility to allow us to be able to do that? And how would, not us, but how would the keeper of the data be able to provide that to us?
I know that I had to make sure I submitted the county. It might be county-wide numbers instead of employer.
You're correct.
From
You
what I-
just have to put your county down.
So we'll work through that. Jerry and I didn't get a chance to talk about that today, but there's a strong, obviously, human resource component, to this. So we'll work closely, but I think there really hasn't been a lot of discussion about how do we find out our numbers, and I think that's a great question. It was a question that we were discussing as early as this morning. So, but again, I want to be able to know how many. So we're working on that, Mr. Cordone. That was a great question. Thank you. So more to follow. A lot of information in the last 48 hours or so. So as we get information, and we've been trying to dispense it as quickly as possible. So as soon as we get something, we verify it and we get it out. And Chris has been doing a great job, with that. And I think Jerry's got emails ready to go, and we're ready to, put links right in them so we can just push the button and that kind of thing. So we're right on target. So with that, we'll keep you apprised. It was a bit of a surprise it moved this quickly. But hopefully the vaccination amounts can keep up and the availability can keep up with how many are needed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry and Dan. We're going to do, this was a question actually came out of our last board meeting around student achievement and our well-being. So this really goes to some of the questions that were generated at the last board meeting. So Dan and Jerry.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Oh, let's get this into present. Can we all see the presentation? Great, thanks. Good evening. So in any typical year, around this time, I'd be presenting some data to you all to provide an update on our students' achievement at the quarter mark. This year, like Mr. Palvino said, we wanted to also satisfy some of those questions that the board has and really that we all have in terms of the pandemic's effect, the impact of remote learning on our students. What Jerry and I have also tried to do with this presentation is to give some context to Fulton's data by also presenting what we're now learning about the pandemic impact nationwide. Over the last month or so, many studies and articles have been released using beginning of year and first quarter data from districts around the country. And we've included some of that to help give some perspective. Also, before I get too far into this, I want to give a special thanks to Liz Tiffany, our Director of Student Support Services, and Will Meekum, our Director of Instructional Support Services, who really did a lot of the legwork to gather this data for us. So thank you to them. So as we get into this, it's important to remember our three main goals as we approached our return to learning. First, of course, was to maximize our capacity to provide a safe, healthy, in-person learning environment for as many Fulton students as possible. We knew in the summer how important it was going to be to put as many students together physically in the classroom with teachers as we could physically support. For those students who and families for whom there's a concern about in-person learning, we committed to providing a comparable online-only alternative to that in-person instruction. And finally, we've committed to providing the highest quality instruction possible within all of these constraints. And along the way, the mantra has been, we'll plan, we'll reflect on that plan, we'll evolve, and we'll repeat. And that's certainly been the case, while we're meeting all of those musts with regards to our students and staff safety.
And just to refresh our memory, our reopening priorities really focused on 3 areas identified by the state and embraced within our plan. And really want to commend all of the members of our school community, our staff, our administrators, our students and families, who are really supporting the effort to put these 3 priorities at the forefront of everything that we're doing. Obviously, health and safety, ensuring that we have procedures and protocols in place to keep our buildings, our students, and our staff as safe as possible. Focusing on the social emotional well-being of all members of our community, because we know the impact of this pandemic has had emotional, behavioral, mental health, economic, societal, familial impacts across the board for all of us. And that is, again, one of our areas of focus. And certainly our core mission as a school district, how are we providing academic support in instruction that helps our students grow and meet those benchmarks?
So we've talked a great deal about our health and safety efforts. So we're going to focus primarily on social emotional well-being and academics and instruction. And at this point in our nationwide global pandemic journey, we know quite a bit more about how this has impacted students' mental health. Very recently, the CDC released a report on children's mental health emergencies over the course of the pandemic. Throughout the presentation, you'll see links to reports that we've referenced, and these are all available. You can link to these through the presentation that's in board docs. So what the CDC has found is that the proportion of mental health related emergency visits has increased dramatically through October, from the beginning of the pandemic through October. Compared with a year ago, mental health related visits for children aged 5 through 11 and 12 through 17 have increased by 24% and 31% respectively. So Jerry is going to tell us how we've monitored this here in Fulton.
So as you know, from our strategic coherence plan and our history of student support framework within the district, we have built-in systems that help us not only provide direct teaching, instruction, and intervention, but also monitoring. Last year, we began using the BIMAS 2, and the BIMAS acronym stands for Behavior Intervention Monitoring Assessment System. And this is the 2nd edition, thus the 2. It is a universal screening that really helps us monitor the social, emotional, and behavior functioning of our students. And we really focused on 3 main reasons why we administer this universal assessment. It's to measure social, emotional wellness. And it helps us identify the need for targeted intervention for specific students in a timely manner. And then we can also use it as a progress monitoring tool for those targeted students as needed. So within the BIMAS, there are a number of areas that really come into focus based on this rating. So our K-6 teachers complete a rating scale on each of their students in their class. Our 7-12 students do a self-report. And there are 34 items in the BIMAS scale, and they measure conduct, which includes things like anger management, bullying behaviors, substance abuse tendencies,
It measures negative affect. Is there anxiety or depression or signs of those? Feelings of withdrawal or sadness that might be indicated by the responses to those questions. It also measures cognitive and attention. So things like, can I focus on my schoolwork? Do I feel organized? Can I plan? Do I remember what has been taught to me? So within those scales, we're measuring areas of risk. There are also adaptive scales that measure strengths of our students. So you're looking at social skills, that things like communication and interaction with others, and academic functioning. How does a student or feel about him or herself when it comes to how responsible they are, their organization and planning, and other asset-based characteristics. So again, students are self-assess in 7-12 and teachers rate in grades K through 6. So this brings us into our elementary results. And again, teachers are providing these ratings. And if you look at the overall categories of conduct, negative affect, and cognitive attention, as well as social and academic functioning, you can see that about 22% of our students are falling into the high risk category in conduct, 5% for negative affect, and 5% for cognitive attention. So what the really good news is there is that 95% of our students have minimal or low risk in those categories. On the asset side of the results, you'll see that for the most part, 78% of our students are being assessed as functioning in the typical, or their social functioning is an area of strength. And again, 76% under academic functioning are functioning typically, or for that in that area is a particular area of strength for them. If you look at our secondary level, you can see results that are not dissimilar. And again, remember, this is self-report of our students. And our students have, under the conduct, only 2% of them have rated themselves as a high risk. 15% indicated feelings that would be associated with negative affect. And 13% identified themselves as high risk for things like attention, focus, organization, planning, and memory. On the asset side, 34% of our students expressed that they have concerns for their social functioning and 15% for their academic functioning. But again, some of the strengths there, 84% of our students overall feel confident in their academic skills. So if you look at this, we first gave this assessment last year. And we have noted, which is not a surprise, that conduct concerns have significantly decreased since last year. That correlates very closely to the fact that we have very minimal behavior referrals or behaviors that are problematic within the learning environment. A higher percent of our students are at risk for negative affect. And again, if you go back to the national trends that Dan shared with us at the beginning of this section of the presentation, that is not inconsistent with what we're seeing nationally and regionally. We have concerns about how our students are doing when it comes to things like anxiety, sadness, and feelings of depression. Our prosocial and academic skills are not observed as frequently as last year. So if you look at last year when teachers had students in class in January every day on a regular basis for a full class period, they noted those skills more prevalent. Kids had more practice and those interactions were observed more frequently. And just a note about the assessment itself. There have not been pandemic norms established yet by Jim McDougall, who is the creator of this assessment. But he informs Liz Tiffany in particular, has had conversations with him around this. The patterns that we're seeing in Fulton are very consistent with what is being seen in the region and across the country by users of this assessment.
Mrs. Geithner, may I ask a question?
Of course.
With the students that are virtual, especially the K through 6 students, how are we able to get an accurate representation, or how is it being assessed with those virtual students? I'm assuming it must be very difficult for behaviors and things like that.
So the teachers are rating them based on their observation and the extent of their contact with them. So the virtual or online academy teachers completed the assessment the same way that the in-person class teachers. We are looking at how do we get parent feedback, because there is a parent rating scale for the BIMAS as well. And if we could supplement the virtual teacher observation with the parent observation, we might have more complete picture of the students functioning.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
So what do we do with these results? So our student support teams determine the need for an intervention. And I should mention that there is one critical item in the BIMAS that would indicate a serious and immediate concern for risk of self-harm. Whenever a student or a teacher would indicate that that was an area of concern, an email automatically goes to the principal of that building and to Liz Tiffany as the Director of Student Support. So there can be an instant response to that student to do an assessment to determine if that student is in need of immediate intervention. So that is one way our student support teams are using that critical data, but they're also using the trend data and looking at this information about how do we do some targeted groups, some targeted interventions, and some targeted area support systems for students who might need just a little extra. The school culture teams, formerly PBIS teams, really look at the building and district trends, and they develop systemic responses around the information that we glean from this assessment. We'll continue to look at this data. We're going to give the assessment again in April. So we'll have an additional set of data to look at, and we'll use that for long-term strategic planning. So that takes us out of the social emotional realm and brings us to attendance and absenteeism. And similar to the nationwide trends that we're seeing around social emotional well-being, there are also some very specific trends around attendance and absenteeism. So if you look at this report that appeared in Ed Week in October of last year, oh, it's hard to say that, October of 2020, student absences across the nation have doubled during the pandemic. And students' absences are up for both in-person and virtual students. We know that there are a whole new set of reasons that students are disconnecting from learning. So this report really reflects on how do we take that into consideration and maybe examine our policies and our interventions around holding students and families accountable for unexcused absences. How do we really look at this through a pandemic lens and recognize the unique circumstances that students and families may be in that are leading to absenteeism? We know that socioeconomic status, our school's location, the conditions within the community are all contributing factors to absenteeism and should help to drive the specific interventions that we choose. And the other reality is, and this is a bright spot, that absenteeism is not being impacted to the extent it was previously by things like suspension, expulsion, or legal consequences.
So here in Fulton, we are seeing some of those trends to a lesser degree overall. We are not nearly at that rate cited in the study, about double the number of absences. And when we look in the big picture of K-12 attendance percentage overall, you can see that while this year at 92.5% compared to 95% last year, we're slightly down in the big picture. It's not a huge decrease overall. Where we do see some really concerning changes are when we start to drill down a bit on our attendance. When we look through the lens of chronic absenteeism, which is the term that the state uses and which is also used by the federal government in the Every Student Succeeds Act definitions of attendance, we do see some concerns as attendance patterns relate to individual students. So when we're talking about chronic absenteeism, you can see at the key at the bottom of the slide, we are breaking students, individual students, into categories by their individual percentages of attendance. So that bright green represents a student who's here more than 95% of the time. The light green, 91% or more. So that green is a student who's here really more than 90% of the time. We start getting into a concern zone in the yellow, and certainly in the red. Our students in the red are here less 81% of the time. Okay, so we can see, you know, the easy way to look at these graphs is more red is not a good thing. So in the top here, we wanted to give some perspective and point of comparison with last year. We also wanted to drill down into whether there are different patterns for our in-person hybrid students versus our remote only students, okay? And we were surprised by that national trend that attendance patterns are affected kind of similarly for in-person and remote students, that attendance is down for all students this year. And we discussed this quite a bit and tried to figure out what relates to that. And, you know, what we've realized is that with our COVID protocols and the importance of ensuring that students don't come to school with any of the symptoms in that COVID checklist, from headache to fatigue to nausea and of course to fever, along with that compliance with those protocols, which is so important to keeping us safe, also comes a hit to attendance. And so
Dan, how are we taking attendance on Mondays? Assuming that when I look at our school calendar, that still is considered a day of instruction and is part of that percentage. Are we assuming that all students are engaged?
No,
how is that being gathered?
So in K6, the day starts with a morning meeting for all students. So a synchronous morning meeting that kicks off their day, their special area day. So they take attendance during that morning meeting with the students, K6. Okay. And in 7-12, there's a meeting with all students as well, in high school through the guided study hall. So this first attendance pie chart slide in relation to the chronic absenteeism rates is that K-12 overview. And then we go into, there's a bit of a breakdown at each level, elementary, junior high, and high school. And we see similar patterns here. More higher increased rates of chronic absenteeism across the board for both our hybrid in-person students as well as our remote students.
Mr. Carroll, just so we're clear as well, these numbers are including a student who gets the sniffles on Monday, maybe goes to the doctor's, gets a COVID test, but doesn't get those results for 4 or 5 days. He cannot go to school while he has those symptoms. And so he's going to show as a chronically absent student. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right. So that's certainly contributing to our in-person. It doesn't account for the remote only absence. You know, that student could still be at home or could still be participating in instruction.
Right, yes, the hybrid models, but the student don't have the option though. So.
Right. So now moving into
moving into the academic update, just again, starting with a global look at trends across our region and nation. Renaissance Learning, which produces the STAR assessment that we use in our district, did a study on the impact of COVID pandemic learning, and they have found, and again, it's probably not surprising to many of us that performance in mathematics is lower in the fall of 2020 than it would have been in a normal non-COVID environment. So if you look at the students who were learning remotely from March, in our case, through June, when they came into school in the fall, their mathematics scores were lower than they would have been anticipated to be had that not occurred. They estimate that in some cases, it may take students 12 weeks or more to catch up on those gaps that exist. The reading scores are also lagging, but that is less of a negative impact than we saw in mathematics through this study. You'll see the Washington Post headline from just last month that more students than ever got Fs in the first term of 2021, and that we know that learning loss is happening, and it's real and it's inequitable. And I think you'll see it play out in our data when we look at our subgroup populations, such as our economically disadvantaged students and our students with disabilities. You will see these trends play out here in Fulton as well.
Jerry, what percentage of our students actually completed the STAR testing?
I'll defer to Dan on that for the.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
I'm just wondering what percentage of our students completed the STAR testing. I'm assuming it's not 100%.
Pretty close. It is pretty close. Yeah, it's not far off from what we'd normally have for our participation in STAR. And that's through 8th grade. We did not administer it in 9-12. Okay, we've stopped administering STAR math in high school. It's been at least a few years now because it's not differentiated by high school math course. Okay, but through 8th grade, really high participation.
How are our STAR scores compared to the national average?
Yeah, we're going to dig into those. We've got some charts and graphs to share. And I can also say, I just saw recently, since we finished putting together this report, we use STAR, so this study is particularly relevant for us. NWEA is another standardized test similar to STAR that many districts use. Their finding is exactly in line with that. The math impact has been significantly more hard hit than the literacy area. And when you think about math instruction and the sequential nature of those skills, you can understand how that is. But I'm going to start with a bright spot in our data here. And this is really an opportunity to celebrate the work of our primary teachers in the area of early literacy and their principals and reading specialists and everyone involved in the Oswego County Literacy Initiative. So we are currently in year 3 of our participation in the Oswego County Literacy Initiative. And as part of the initiative, we share data as a county to measure our growth. Okay. What we have here, the main data point that we reflect on is 3rd grade oral reading fluency. All right. So in essence, that's how quickly and smoothly, how fluently a student reads. And that 3rd grade data point is the one that we reference because that's the one on which our goals are set for the initiative. Our goal, of course, is to have nearly all students reading at grade level by 3rd grade. Okay. So the gray here is 2020. The blue is 2019. So this year, last year, green is good. Okay. You can see that as a county, data reflected that national trend, unfortunately, with a decline in that green percentage. However, here in Fulton, we saw just the opposite. We saw that our beginning of year 3rd grade benchmark percentage of students at grade level actually increased. And as we reflected on this, what we realized is that these 3rd grade students are in year 3 of having teachers who've participated in the initiative, participated in all of the professional development and coaching, have engaged in letters training in their literacy instruction, and that it's paying off. We've been really excited to see those gains increasing from year to year towards that goal of all third graders reading on grade level. And we think, we really see that it's that capacity of our teachers to make great instructional decisions in early literacy that really helped our students from falling behind in the way that others around the nation have. I think it's particularly interesting when we look at these third grade scores, again, that culmination of multiple years of that OCLI effect. And we can see, moving on to the next one, when we look at all K-3 students, we do see that decline from last year to this year in terms of proficiency at the beginning of the year, okay? If we drill down grade by grade, we would see that effect even greater beginning in the lower grades and lessons moving up to third. So our kindergartners really came in at a lower place than we've seen in several years, okay? But we have high hopes. We are right now in the midst of our middle of year benchmarking period. So we're very eager to see the growth that's taken place between September and January. And of course, we'll share that with you. So Jerry pointed out in one of the studies that we referenced, and it's a really interesting one, that the pandemic's impact is not equally felt. It's very much an inequitable burden on our groups, our subgroups that are more vulnerable to begin with, okay? Again, an easy reference, easy way to look at this is more red is more concern, all right? So along this top row, we have last year's data. Along the lower row, we have current year data. Again, we're still in that early literacy zone, okay? This is K-3 as a whole group. And so we can see we had more red when we look at all students together. As we break into our economically disadvantaged students, we see that gap increase. The pandemic's impact felt harder. And we see that substantially with our students with disabilities. We have seen this impact play out at all grade levels to where that gap is more severely felt in our economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities groups. We're now moving up from early literacy from K-3 up to intermediate levels in 4-6. Jerry pointed out earlier that these look like carnival pinwheels or something here. The easy way to look at this, again, red is concern, yellow, warning, blue, light green to green are increasingly better. Bright green, of course, being the best, okay? We can see, consistent with the national trends, our concern levels for all students have increased, and those concerns, again, are exacerbated with our economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities groups. And again, we're now shifting to math, and in line with that national STAR data, we can see that the negative impact on math is more severely felt here in Fulton as well. And again, even more so with our more vulnerable groups. We're now jumping into the secondary level and taking a look at grades. Okay, the impact. We wanted to take a look at our data on grades for our hybrid students versus our online only students. And you can see that we share that same concern that is shown nationally. Our online only students at the junior high struggled quite a bit in the first quarter in comparison to those students who are coming in at least for 2 days. Okay. So when we look at this, green indicates that the student's passing all classes, yellow means that they're failing one class, and red indicates they're failing 2 or more classes. And we see very similar looking pies at the high school level when we look across hybrid and online only students. This is, I can say that this is very much at the top of our agenda among my colleagues in the county, in the CIC, in the County Instructional Committee. This is an issue that we discuss at each of our meetings. We have another one Friday. We'll be discussing it again. It's in line with what we see as a nation. And again, it is a great concern, the impact that this is having on our online only students. And if we play these out and drill down into our online only economically disadvantaged students, we see that red portion growing even more so. And again, even more so with our online only students with disabilities. I'm going to take this opportunity to make a plug that we do have capacity in person. And by all means, our arms are open and welcoming to all families who are recognizing that the online only choice isn't working as well as we'd like for their students. Fully understanding that that's not an option for our families that have health concerns.
Dan, do we have a comparison on this one? I can't remember on the first quarter what it normally looks like compared to last year. Because I know normally we ride right around somewhere between 68 and 72%.
Didn't include it here. It was a tough editing decision with these slides. We didn't want to.
I know there was a lot there, but the hybrid is very similar to isn't it more similar to what we normally look like?
It's pretty right. That's a great point. The hybrid pies are pretty close to what we'd see in a typical year.
Great.
And again, that's it. You know, it speaks to that decision to really prioritize having students in person, having that possibility, that opportunity for as many students as possible.
Right.
Have we seen any increase in the school to home liaisons doing home visits? I know that would have to look very different in this environment, but I guess I'm just wondering what interventions with that increased number, how are we at a distance or as close as we can trying to engage students that are totally remote and just keeping track of them and keeping them connected?
Yeah, I'll let Jerry speak to the specifics on the school home liaisons, but you know, this extends beyond our school home liaisons. School home liaisons certainly, but you know, shortly before this meeting, I was on the phone with one of our elementary principals who was just finishing a round of daily, in some cases, or weekly contacts with online only families. There's coaching involved. There's a lot of support. Online only teaching, if you have any experience with it, is difficult. It's a difficult situation for families. Jerry, if you could fill in some more in relation to the school home liaisons.
Sure. School home liaisons, but student support teams as a whole, which are made up of, all of our school psychologists, counselors, school home liaisons, and community agency partners, are doing lots of creative intervention up to including home visits. At the high school, there's only one school home liaison. So looking at this particular slide and this data, it's an all hands on deck approach. So the student support team, but also mobilizing our aides, our teaching assistants. People are making deliveries and just in hopes of seeing a student's face and giving them positive words of encouragement by dropping off something that they might need for learning. So those interventions are underway. We keep coming back to the drawing table every week in a student support team meeting, coming up with new and innovative ways to try to connect with students who are not feeling engaged with their school and their learning. And we also are leveraging our community partners for some of our more serious and concerning cases, particularly if safety is also a concern in addition to learning.
Yeah, just to add, I think the GRB has a number of different teams too, leadership team, site-based team. In each one of those different forums, this is the central part of the conversation. And we're looking at ways to increase the opportunities for that face-to-face time, expanding learning time, and really trying to draw attention and communicate with our families to support our families as well. There's a lot of pieces there. We don't have Ms. Parkhurst on here this evening, but when we meet with her every Thursday, this is a central part of this conversation. And I think that, when we hear from others, this is not unique to us, but I think we need to if we could get those numbers looking more like those hybrid numbers back to what we look like, and still I don't like what that number even looks like either, but back to that more normal kids passing all of their classes the first quarter. But there's a lot going on in those committees and really looking at how to best maximize those minutes that we have our kids in our midst, whether it's remotely or if it's in person. But that's there's a lot going on at the school. It's a great question, and it's an ongoing every week, taking that data, digging in, and figuring out how can we reach our kids more effectively and more efficiently, because our kids, it's hard for some kids. I met with a young man this morning, and I can tell I know him from before COVID. We knew each other, and I believe it's hard to get engaged, and I think he's struggling with that engagement. And I think the structures and the feedback that we can provide to our families and kids on an ongoing basis. So I think we were just talking about having to gather more information, get a litmus test on where we're at. We're about due for a survey again, as well as some forums. So I think we're continuing. I think we're evolving. I think the Mondays have proven pivotal, actually, in some of the strategies that we're using in our classrooms. I didn't comment on the elementary, but I need to thank the board for the support for the strategic coherence plan. It was funny. My team said I was frustrated with this more, when you're looking at all this data and you're saying, wow, look at how close we were to pushing that rock over the top for our kids with our work in literacy. But at the same time, look how our kids didn't regress and how we're starting. So there's two ways to look at that. So I appreciated that. So we're on to something. And I think as we go into the budget process, we have to make sure that we're poising ourselves to make sure that those key elements of our strategic coherence plan and those key elements that we're seeing in the data have a budget that supports what we need to do to make sure that we get our kids and keep them on the rails towards graduation and beyond. So,
Mr. Carroll, for our STAR assessments for our elementary, is that data available in School Tool for elementary?
I will have to check with Mr. Meekum as to whether this year's data is available.
Okay.
Previous year's data is definitely available. I have to check on this year's.
Okay, so because I've checked in the last couple of weeks and I hadn't seen it, but I'm not sure if it's gone in since then. So my question is if we're seeing a decline on STAR assessments and if it's not in School Tool, how are we communicating that to parents? If parents are trying to check school tool, but it's not there, then many are unaware of a child's regression or STAR scores. Myself having 2 children in elementary. And then my other question or point to that is often those STAR tests are just numbers. How are we also communicating and teaching parents how to interpret that data? If a child has a score of 656, does the parent really know what that means?
Sure. So this is big picture data, of course. We would, expect that on that individual basis that teacher and school are communicating in cases of concern or when intervention is needed. That's a great point about the need to educate in relation to what the scores mean. And we can certainly do better with that. We send the report and with the report card, the language of that parent report is not the most parent friendly. That's the report that STAR generates with the student score. But I hear you that we could do better in terms of our communication and kind of assessment literacy for parents. The final point I want to make, my computer kind of glitched. Do we still see the presentation? Okay. The final point, one that really resonated with us from a study there that's linked from a group called McKinsey, is that point that post-pandemic planning needs to begin now. Okay. We don't need to wait until June 2021 data to know that this pandemic has had a negative impact on student achievement here in Fulton, here in Oswego County, and across the country. We know it now, and therefore it's our responsibility now to begin that planning for when we come out of this, okay? Here, that's become the mission of our elementary and secondary curriculum councils. We'll actually be meeting again next week. So within department areas at the elementary and secondary level, they are beginning that work of looking at, of using the essential standards that they have identified in each curriculum, helping to identify now which are those standards that we know through the year aren't being mastered the way they would in a typical year, so that we can start developing those supplements to curriculum and intervention plans now, so that we're not waiting until our students come back into school after this is over and waiting for that data to begin addressing it.
Mr. Carroll, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
One, I'm curious as to, do we know how much access our students have to reading material, to books, seeing how libraries aren't operating like they did in the past? That's one thing that just keeps, I'm bothered by. Are they able to access reading material, and are we doing a good enough job to make sure if it's online that they understand what those resources look like?
So that's a great point. We don't have a surefire way of knowing what types of access they do. Not like we know Mr. Lisi's access. We can see all the great books and his background there. But to that point, I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Witter, our Director of Literacy in UPK, who has set up our connection with the Read to Them initiative. You might remember a couple of years ago, we engaged in this initiative. This is where every student in grades K-8 receives a book, the same book. Nice, brand new, beautiful book. And it's exactly towards that point that you raise, Mrs. Griffin, to make sure that every student has a high quality book in their hands. Our in elementary, our special area team on Mondays is going to be developing a lot of special area, interdisciplinary instructional opportunities in relation to that text. So you'll be seeing more news about that very shortly, and your neighbors will be receiving those books. So we're really excited about that.
And just not for nothing, but if we could just periodically let parents know of a couple of books that are exceptional that they might want to have their child to access that are available online. I know there's a lot of free material online.
Yeah, there is.
I don't know that parents always think about that. I mean, they're incredibly busy. And so if we could do a nice job of trying to periodically just toss it out there in case they'd forgotten to utilize that resource.
Sure.
Or even some of our older students to remind them. They may, if they're not regular users, I think they forget that that's there, and that they could utilize it. The second thing I wondered about, it's not something I wondered about. It's an observation. So, not that I get to see a lot of people, but it is, I get to see people out in my yard if I'm out, or sometimes I'm doing virtual visits. Our secondary students, I've heard overwhelmingly, and not just Fulton students, but just secondary students in general, whether they're Fulton students or elsewhere, I find it interesting. They all have commented to me that the one thing that helps them most is teacher feedback. So I want to say kudos to the teachers that provide quality feedback. Our kids appreciate it, and they say it really has helped them move forward in their learning.
Well, with so many things, this pandemic really exaggerates things that we know in normal times. We know that feedback is always critical, and I couldn't agree with you more that in this time when students really need connection, that feedback can really be the conduit between connecting student, teacher, and learning. And, just an aside and kind of a hypothesis that Jerry and I have been talking about, and Mr. Polvino also this afternoon, one of the kind of immeasurable things that gets lost in the remote only environment are those kind of spontaneous interactions between teacher and student. When the formal instruction stops, when the lesson's finished, that conversation on the way out the door, that conversation at the desk. Unfortunately, those are the things that are hard. Those are the interactions, those opportunities for feedback and connection that are really hard to replicate. And
I would say too that at the secondary level, not even just secondary level, the kids are feeling, our higher achieving kids are feeling like they're not getting the depth that they are used to. So they do recognize that. I don't know if they've expressed it to staff, but they do recognize that it's different, and they don't feel like they're getting necessarily the same, I don't know, same amount. Depth is a better word, I guess, for me, as I listen to how they explain.
I think both are accurate, depth and amount.
Yeah, they're just. I've heard that comment, so I find that interesting. And again, I know it's a different environment. Everybody's trying. As much as I look at what's going on with achievement or lack thereof, I don't think that it's necessarily because people aren't trying. I think people are trying very hard.
Absolutely. And I'll bet if Mr. Kopani and Mrs. Parkhurst are watching right now, they're crossing their fingers that I don't spill the beans on plans that they're working, with their teams on. But what I know for sure is in the coming weeks, our junior high and high school families are going to hear specific details on initiatives that I'm really confident are going to help to increase that sense of depth and even quantity of instruction and connection to teachers. They're working really hard. And I can say,
here.
yeah, and that feeling that you shared, Mrs. Griffin, from the students, I can promise you is felt by the teachers as well. Our teachers are being very hard on themselves. It's a very difficult year for teachers who know the standards that they have for themselves and the outcomes that they've grown to expect and be able to help their students reach. And it's just a really difficult year for committed teachers who are feeling that they can't help their students get to those same places.
And not for anything, I forgot, but Sam's here, and Sam, I would just wondered if you could weigh in on what your thoughts are, and just in general. Well, maybe we'll. Oh, maybe we lost him.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Please.
Have we thought of maybe doing our hybrid classes a little different? I've just been in touch with quite a few people, different districts, and they're doing it differently, and they're having a real good outcome. So I just wondered if we've ever thought about it.
Again, Mrs. Parkhurst, if you're out there, I'm going to, yes, 100% every day. I've been involved with these conversations with them. Absolutely. A lot of thinking and planning and scrapping of what we find will not work and back to the drawing board. It's that plan, reflect, evolve is very much in action. And like I say, well, before our next board meeting, families will receive some details.
Right.
Some innovations.
And we'll share that with the board as well. We'll tighten up those things. I mean, there are a lot of things that we're trying to tighten up, and I think none of us, if you could go back and change things back to August or July, would you make some adjustments? I'm not sure we'd make wholehearted adjustments. We would take what we learned and we would improve. I think we're doing some things here that other places aren't. I think there are some things that are happening in other places that we're learning from, and we're trying to take all those best practices and best support our students and our staff to be able to do that. Obviously, we want to make sure that our kids are getting the best experience possible. And how can we provide that is by listening, watching, and then reacting. And we had made a commitment right along to look at how could we make adjustments for that second semester, and that's rapidly approaching. COVID keeps throwing us some curveballs, like right now, I wish our kids were fully engaged, and unfortunately we're not. But hopefully that we can re-engage next week and get back to where we were, and then make those adjustments over the coming weeks and make some tweaks that hopefully will impact a greater number of kids and improve the experience for all of our kids and staff. So that's
just to reinforce what Robin had pointed out, it gets to the heart of synchronous instruction, of what that is. It's the dialogue that happens between that opportunity between teachers and students. And I've heard similarly the same feedback that there's a desire for more as much as possible.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Mr. Carroll, with the end of the marking period being the 29th, we'll be making that announcement with plenty of time to make sure that students and staff and families are able to plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess we opened up a can of worms, huh?
No, not at all. Not a can of worms.
There's so much going on. I think next week is a pivotal week for us, because it's that week and a half before as we try to tighten things down. And there's a lot of working parts. It's not as, if you do one thing, something else throws it out of sync. So it's multiple things at the same time that you have to keep in balance to make sure that we can get the job done the way we need to. So,
well, I think you're doing an excellent job, all of you.
There's an amazing team here in Fulton, and our support of our board has been absolutely fantastic. I think our plan, actually, our 5-year plan is actually helping us in the background. Quietly, it's there. And I think it's helped us kind of where we're at right now. The key will be, as I said earlier, is one, amazing staff, amazing team that everybody's working together, kids, our families. This has not been easy. And, obviously we've got 6 more months to run through this thing. And we have a big budget challenge facing us, and how can we, develop something that as we transition back into full time, where we can hit every cylinder running, and even thinking about what are those opportunities that we could try to create throughout the course of the summer as we transition to give our kids and staff opportunities to be prepared and hit the ground at full stride, come September. This is one where, we have to look at that and see how can we best manage our resources and target opportunities for our kids throughout the course of this, from now right on through. We're working on each and every day is a new opportunity to make a difference for one of our kids and all of our kids. So that's where we're at right now.
I just want to say that I agree with Lynn. We're doing a great job here, folks. I hear from families, I hear from grandparents. Everybody knows that this isn't normal, and it's hard, incredibly hard all the way around. But I don't hear, no one's complained really to me that it's awful. Do they have wishes about things being a little bit different? Yeah, sure they do. Everybody does. But overall, the feeling is everybody's trying. And as long as we continue to be good listeners and try to address our student needs, I think that we will continue to see the kind of support we've enjoyed from the community. And I think that speaks volumes to what you put together last summer, not having ever done this really before. All we knew was what bad stuff we experienced last spring when we didn't know anything, and we were totally ill prepared. So we've come a long way. And I know we have lots more to do for our kids. And I did see something written here not long ago, which gave me pause to think. And it was from someone who had grown up in a war-torn nation and lost a lot of schooling. And their message was to the parents of the pandemic. Their message was they missed a lot, but they got caught up, and they didn't finish things in the normal timeline that would have been expected for them. But they ended up having a very full, finishing their education and going on and developing a career for themselves and being very successful. So that was the message, is that it may not happen in the timeline that we normally anticipate, but we will get this done because parents want it for their children and children want to learn.
Great point. Thank you. So there's a lot of information we presented to you tonight. There's a lot, and you can see we look at all that information on a daily basis. So again, we look forward to sharing things with you through our daily updates and throughout the next week and a half. And then obviously keep you apprised of anything that we communicate to our families, you will receive as well. And then obviously at the next board meeting, any significant adjustments we will share with you as well. I will go into presentation mode, which means I won't be able to see everybody, which drives me nuts. But I'll take us quickly through the next two pieces. Let's see, is this going to work for me or no? There we go. The first thing I wanted to put up is my calendar up on, or is the instructional calendar on the screen, Ms. Griffin?
Yes.
One of the things that you're going to be looking at this evening, if you remember at the beginning of the year, we moved 2 superintendents conference days up front in the schedule right here on September 8 and 9 from the beginning of the year. But we also had one scheduled for February the 5th. That February the 5th, we are recommending to the board to make an adjustment, make that an instructional day. And after the presentation you just heard, we need as much contact time with kids as possible. I believe our Mondays and the professional development that we're doing and the professional learning communities are the strongest I think I've ever seen in our schools. They're really amazing, the work that our teachers are doing. I think the best thing we can do is have our kids in session on the 5th, and hopefully that'll be in person because we're supposed to be back on the 19th. So I think that's an important date. So recommend your consideration this evening when that resolution comes up, that the purpose of that is to provide another in-person day, another opportunity for us to make those connections and engage our students. Are there any questions with respect to that?
I do have one question. It's for the Regents Week in January.
Yeah.
They're not holding Regences this January, correct?
Correct.
So those will be all in-person student days?
That is the plan as far as my knowledge, yes.
Well, I was just curious because it still says the Regent exam days on the calendar, so I just wanted to clarify with you.
That's a great question. They were there. I think we've had them there. You know, probably could remove them. They are not going to be in session, so we could remove those. That's a good catch.
Just
Now,
so that our families will know that their high school students would be attending. That might be a good thing to pop out there.
Yep. How's the rest of my team feel about that? Y'all, I think we're good. Yep. I think that's a great catch, Miss Bell. And that's why many hands make light work. So thank you for catching that. Any other questions about the calendar?
Everybody good with that change? Okay.
All right. The other piece, the next piece is on the budget. Let me turn my page here. I will tell you, every time I've had the opportunity, I've started going to the site-based team meetings in each of the schools. And I've walked away each time with individuals that want to participate on our budget committee.
Very good.
And one of them, actually, at one of the elementary schools I was at the other day, she actually has children at the junior and senior highs, but still has a connection through that school, the elementary school, and she has a business in the community. So we're finding people coming out. It's going to be fantastic. We have made on the calendar, and the reason why I put this up, initially on the initial calendar, we wanted to do the budget committee on the 19th. We won't have much information because the governor has until the 19th to release his executive budget. So we won't really have any new information. We'd like to move the budget committee to March 2nd in there, and then we'll have that opportunity, the budget committee rather to February 2nd, and also on March 2nd. We could add another date if necessary in between, but moving that date from January 19 to February 2nd and changing that from a workshop, because we have the opportunity for a budget meeting or a board meeting on the 26th. We have a board meeting on the 9th, and I'd like to put a committee meeting right in the middle. And that would give us that opportunity to start gathering that information and get some initial responses to some of the information that will come out from the governor's office, hopefully by the 19th. By statute, I believe he has to have that out, is what I've been reading. So that's what's going on. So we just want to make that adjustment, but it is each committee, each site-based I've been going to, I've been thrilled about the interest. There's some individuals that have been on past committees, and they have actually spoken to their participation on those budget committees in the past, and very positive feedback about that level, that participation. And in fact, a couple of them want to rejoin the committee, so that'll be a great thing. The other pieces, just look back at my notes here quick. To this date, we have not had any withholdings with respect to any of our state aid coming in. Our January payment, Ms. Nichols, normally comes around January 15th, so it should be the latter part of this week, early part of next week. We should see the January payments coming in, but right now, September through December, there were no withholdings, so that's good news. But now we're getting into the latter part of the state's fiscal year as well, so it'll be very interesting to see the next couple of weeks. If you had the opportunity, the State of the State address started yesterday. I didn't realize it was a 2-day opportunity. So I caught yesterday, very little mention of education, but an emphasis on the importance of federal funds. I did provide you probably a great deal. I shared with you a number of articles yesterday, Rural Schools Association on board. There was a number of interpretations from the state. I thought it was good information that provide. We'll also share those types of pieces of information with the budget committee as we move forward. And then there was another session today, although I did not have the opportunity. And we'll go from there. So now you'll be able to see me, as I heard a ding from afar saying I was still presenting. So so here I am and back this way. And so I just wanted to get you up to speed with those types of things. Executive budget, no withholdings, and that was it. Yes, ma'am?
Do we have a committee?
So we have a committee that we're assembling at this point in time. We have, Ms. Perry's been keeping the names as we move forward. Hopefully by the end of, I think it's early next week, I would have met with most of the site-based teams. If not all of them will have representation. I wanted to meet with each of the teams to collect, to get representation on there. If you have anybody in the community that would be interested, let me know as well, and we can reach out to those individuals as well.
Okay, thank you.
We have somebody that's been reaching out to you, Ms. Lyons, that has lots of interest in budget. That's the type of person that we're interested
Well, I
in.
have people that have been asking about our budget, let's put it that way.
Well, if there's anybody out there that you feel that may that could would like to participate, let us know, and we can look at that as we assemble
Will
the team.
do.
Yep, because I'd like to get those invitations out early next week, so people have time to put the time in their schedules and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Can you just confirm a date for me? I've got April 8th for a tentative budget workshop, but that's a Thursday. It looks like we've been doing them on Tuesdays. Is it supposed to be April 6th of 2021 or the 8th?
Let me see here. I think I have a hard copy somewhere here in front of me. There it is. April 8th. Yep, tentative budget workshop. Is that when's our board meeting? Our board meeting is on the...
Is on the 13th, but we had been doing them every Tuesday.
So I'm wondering, I wonder if that should be the 6th.
Yeah, that's what I'm heard too.
Okay. We can make that adjustment. Is the board interested in making that adjustment? I think what happened was we got onto the second April meeting throws those dates off all the time. Let's see. Yep. So we could do April 6th. If we need, do we want to put tentative next to that, and we can put that on the 6th, not the 8th.
Okay.
Okay.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I know the next time I talk to you in a public forum like this at a board meeting, we should have the executive budget runs, and everybody hold their breath. Hopefully it'll be I'm hoping flat or better. That would be wonderful. So that would be the hope, the best hope I have. With that, that's the conclusion of the superintendent's report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to ask my colleagues, I'd like to batch 4.01 through 4.06, if you're good with that. Thumbs up or something, okay? So 4.01 through 4.06, would someone move those?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Albagor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme,
Yes.
Would someone move item 4.07?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay. Mrs. Albagor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme,
Yes.
I was wondering if you'd like to batch 5.01 through 5.04. A thumbs up if you would like to do that. All right, would someone move items 5.01 through 5.04?
Move it.
Second.
Is there any discussion on any of these items? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Albagor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
and Mr. DeJalorme.
Yes.
I would like to batch 6.01 through 6.05. A thumbs up if you're good with that. All right, would someone please move 6.01 through 6?
Move it.
Second.
Is there any discussion for any of these items? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Elbegore,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJorme.
Yes.
So board forum, I'm going to start with the proprietors this evening. Sam, are you here?
Who?
His icon is here, but maybe he can't hear us. And then
I don't know. I'll try one more time. Sam May, are you with us?
Oh, Sam.
Sorry, I was muted.
Anything you'd like to share, or thoughts or questions at the board forum, Sam?
I just wanted to say that I hope everybody had a great Christmas and hopefully 2021 is a lot better than 2020.
Good sentiment. Thank you. All right, Tim.
Well, everything's looking pretty good. I mean, we've had good weather, which helps.
Yeah.
Even though they say it's supposed to start changing next week. Sunny, 80 every day. Might not be here, but it'll be somewhere. And just hope everyone stays safe and healthy. That's it.
Thank you. Brenda.
I just want to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope that our staff and students are able to get back into in-person learning next week. Looks like we have a good plan. Let's just hope that the numbers are in our favor. Thank you for all of the information this evening and for all that you guys do.
Thank you. Dave.
Nothing additional. Just wanted to reiterate what Mrs. Abelgore said. Thanks for the report that we asked for. The data was informative. Thanks.
Lynn.
Well, I can't say much more. Everybody has really has said it all. The only thing I'd like to say is thank you, Fallon, for saying that you would like more information that public can understand. I think it's so important, and I know I say that almost every meeting, but to get out and just to talk in their language sometimes is a lot better. So thank you, everybody.
Nick.
Yes, just a thank you to Mr. Ells for his efforts in getting GRB as a vaccine site. And thank you to Mr. Polvino and his team for that great presentation tonight. Thank you.
Fallon.
Well, Mr. DeJorme just took the words right out of my mouth.
Imagine that.
I will say ditto, and it's nice to see everybody, and Happy New Year.
Well, everyone's done a good job tonight. And again, my thanks along with everyone else. I hope you all have had a good start to the new year. I agree with Sam. I hope it's a much better year for everyone. Please all stay healthy if you can. And that's all I have to say. So with that, I need someone to move item 7.02. We need to go into an executive session.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Well, Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Can I ask who the second was? Tim moved it, and who was the second?
Fallon.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Elbegore,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJorme.
Yes.
And with that, I take a 5-minute break, folks, and come back and we'll start executive session. And to those of you that joined us this evening, I thank you for taking the time. I hope you found it helpful. And 5 minutes and we'll be back to finish our work. Thank you. All set?
Tim, are we live?
Pardon me?
I was just asking Mr. Wilson, are we live, Mr. Wilson?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you.
We're returning from our executive session, and we have 2 resolutions to add tonight as a result of executive session. We have item 6.06, and Mrs. Geithner, will you read that for us?
Resolved that this Board of Education appoints the following officers as required by Board Policy 2210. Deputy Claims Auditor, Jamie Ingersoll, at the rate of $22 per hour.
Okay, and let's see, I am going to ask, Mr. Crandall, I see you move it, Dave? Dave moves.
Second.
Okay. This is first. And Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. DeGuarm,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
and I'm missing Mrs.
Yes.
Epler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay. Item 6.07, it's a termination, and would you read that for us, please, Mrs. Geithner?
Resolved that the employment of 1-year appointee of Melissa Wells in the position of tax collector, which ends on June 30th, 2021, is hereby terminated effective January 12th, 2021. Such action terminates all employment as of January 12th, 2021.
Thank you. And someone move that?
I'll move it. Second.
Okay, so Tim moves. Okay, and Mr. Cordone,
Yes. Second.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. DeGuarm,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
and myself, yes. And that also passes 700. Okay, that brings us to action item 7.03, adjourning.
Move it.
Second.
Let's see,
9:18.
Tim, 9:18, and Nick seconded. And all those in favor, you can give me a thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 700. I thank you all.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Good night, everyone.